You ready?
I think we are ready. We are live. We're 4 seconds into it. So take a breath, take a moment, and then we'll just jump right in.
Excellent.
So, so
Hello, everybody. This is Alberto Kennedy, aka Grimoire, and this is Cards on the Table. Past is Prologue, and the author, the creator of this podcast, is in the question seat. So this is going to be interesting. It's going to be fun, and it's going to be informative because how could Ty Zen Davidson or Divine Chaos, how could he not bring some game to this table? So let's see what we can do today. How are you doing, Ty?
I am doing excellent. So hi, everybody. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, my special guest, my best friend, my brother, my mentor, the check to my balance, and sometimes the balance to my check. But pleasure to have you, Alberto John Kennedy, also known as Grimoire.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you, Ty. Past is Prologue. Could you give us a little background on that?
So Past is Prologue, it's a line from one of my favorite classic authors. We all know him as William Shakespeare. And William Shakespeare penned a number of great classical plays, but one being The Tempest. And Past is Prologue is a line taken from that Shakespearean play, The Tempest. But Past is Prologue actually means the past being something that prepares you for the future. And things that we've gone through in the past, where sometimes whether we knew it or not, or whether it appeared to be as such, the past was actually setting the stage, almost a spiritual window, if you will, into the future, because you learn from your mistakes. If you're wise enough and prudent enough to pay attention, then you can learn from your past and you can evolve. And I feel like now we're living in this pivotal moment where, and I've heard it in spaces and so many other places, and everyone's talking about, being free and ascending and transformation. All year we've kind of carried this theme of transformation and things happening throughout the year that have been getting us ready for that next chapter, for that elevated place. And, of course, with my most recent situations, and we'll get into that into the conversation. But again, I feel like that a lot of the things that, that I've been dealing with personally, have all been in preparation for where I'm going for the remainder of this year. And I feel like, the year started off kind of rough and rocky for a lot of people, but at the same time, there were some remnants, some things that we needed to shake off, some things that we needed to make peace with, because sometimes we carry things that even if we say we've been healed from them, even if we say we've moved on, have we really, and those things kind of peek their heads up, in opportune moments. And so Past is Prologue. It's like, and some of us are so fascinated with the past. Like, we love to talk about the things that we used to do and how we used to be. And at the same time, you're not making room for the new. And so the overarching theme for tonight is the new, welcoming in the new. So Past is Prologue. Past, we love you, we appreciate you, but we got to put you to bed now and move forward.
Yep. The past is the beginning. So it would be the beginning is Prologue. That's how I interpreted it when I saw the title. The past is the beginning, but a beginning is not really the destination. It's the beginning of embarking upon that destination. So I found the past is Prologue, a very, very deep, intellectual, and even, since I'm an empath, emotional power to it. So it was a very, very good title for the Cards on the Table. I wanted to ask, what does the word home mean to you?
Well, ideally, when we talk about home, we think of a place. And, I don't want to go off on like some Wiz or Wizard of Oz moment where like there's no place like home, and home being the place where you grew up, home being the place where people knew you, cheers, you want to go where everybody knows your name. Sometimes you don't. But, for me, home, I think that in my thinking and in my world, home is not the place where I was born. Like, I don't, because you hear a lot of people say, my hometown. I don't subscribe to a notion or a theory or a feeling of having a hometown. I have a city that I was born in. That's Little Rock, Arkansas. I have family that I was born into. So those would be my immediate family, my cousins, my siblings. Well, I'm the only one left now in my family, but people who knew me. But again, that's people who knew me where I was. If you ask me where I consider to be home, and that being New York City now, but Santa Barbara is my home. And Santa Barbara is my hometown. And even before Santa Barbara, Los Angeles, because again, most of my family is from Los Angeles. And for the number of years that I lived in Los Angeles, before I even moved to Santa Barbara, I still didn't have those connections. I didn't have that closeness to people in Los Angeles. But when I moved to Santa Barbara, and then I met you, and I met Marcus, and Caesar, and Nancy, and Robert Mendez, and all the people, right? And we all clicked at different times. It wasn't always an instant thing, but at the same time, it's like once we clicked and we locked in. And so for my formative years, and I say formative only because there are things that I wasn't able to do. And I'm not even talking, and the other thing I want to give clarity to is because a lot of times when you move away from a place, and especially if it's a place where you're familiar and you're known, and you move away and you start to do something different, and people from where you are, or people who are from where you're from, they see that difference and they think, oh, well, that's why you moved away. Oh, he moved away to go over here and do this, to go and do that. No, baby, I moved because guess what? One, I knew that that's not where I was meant to be. And number two, I knew that I would always be limited. Now, again, if other people can thrive in places, baby, thrive, grow, build, do you to the fullest. That was not my place to build. That was not my place to thrive. And it wasn't my place to ascend. So when you ask home is the place where you feel most connected, and where you felt and found the most growth, and where you found your purpose. And so again, Santa Barbara was my launching pad. New York City was my destination, but guess what? New York City is probably not the final destination,
It never is. It never is. There's not going to be any final destination. You are moving towards something. So it stands to reason on a journey that you'll pass certain things. You'll stay somewhere for a while, then you'll move on because you're on a mission. Everybody has a mission. You are on yours. I think that's beautiful.
Past is prologue, right?
Okay, it's the truth, Another thing about home, you decide in your heart what your home is, what you feel. And then home, sure, it's a place of growth. It's a place of learning, and a place of connections and networking. But more importantly, home is a place of love.
Right.
Where you feel love, well, people looked at you because you've touched a lot of people, you've touched hearts, you've touched minds. That's what you do. You couldn't be a life coach, you couldn't be everything that you're bringing to the table if you did not inspire that in others, and that's what you do. And in our friendship, since I know you for a while now, right, that's what you did. You always inspired me. You've always inspired me, and you gave me ideas. You gave me direction. You gave me focus. Sometimes I'm not focused. As an empath, I'm ruled by my emotions. And so sometimes I can be a conflagration. Sometimes I'm a laser, but you help me with that. So I'm very appreciative of our friendship, and you are my brother.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that, and you're welcome.
I want to ask.
You like we said in the last show, you've seen me at my lowest and you've seen me at my brightest, but you've seen me, and I feel like everybody wants to be seen. And so when we talk about home, and guess what? Home is who you are to yourself and how you feel. So again, we have this treasure in
very true.
When we talk about, source. And so again, everyone has their idea of a spiritual connection or a higher power. but there's no higher power than the one that's already living inside of you. And to be connected with that is going back home. So if you ask me what home means to me today in 2025, August 29th at 9:10 p.m. Eastern Standard, 6:10 p.m. Pacific Standard, and I don't know what time it is in the middle, but home is where you feel at your best, being your best inside of you. Home.
Yes, I agree. How would you describe your upbringing and your early beginnings?
Wow, that's a loaded question. It's one that, and again, I want to take our time in this discussion tonight because part of, talking about the past and talking about home and talking about transformation and talking about new destinations, right? Because I feel like there's some things that I needed to unload. And the reason why I say unload is because I have finally reached a point in my life where I realized that, you know what, I have spent my entire life, whether voluntarily, involuntarily, on purpose, by accident, but always being in a position of two places. So either being collateral damage or a consequence of someone else's poor choices or someone else's choices, life choices. And you say, well, what does that mean? That makes no sense? It does, because when you're a kid, when you're growing up, and especially in a family dynamic, you pretty much have no agency outside of that your family, your parents set for you. So for a
True.
number of years, you're in the household, you have to, follow certain rules. You have to, maybe try to live up to certain expectations, but these are all things that people have set out before you, and you have no voice in that. You have no agency over your being. And, in the Black family, and again, this could be any family, but I grew up in a Black family, so I'm only sharing my experience, right?
Exactly.
And so, fortunately, in the Black family, there's not much room for difference. There's not much room for anything other than whatever I tell you to do. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
my is this, in my house is that. And if you're gonna, it's so again, when you grow up with that type of, covering over you, unfortunately, you're going to find yourself sometimes being the collateral damage. And let's just be raw about it, because I promised that this show would be one. Again, I made jokes about it earlier on Facebook, and it's like, you're going to say that in public? And oh my God, don't you know how many people follow you who've known you your whole life? Or there are people who follow you who maybe saw you as this and didn't know that? You're going to say that in public? You're damn right, I'm going to say it in public. I sure am. Because again,
Yes, I want to say this before you continue. Remember this. You, Ty, you speak your heart, you speak your truth, because lies shame themselves. The truth is the only thing that will redeem you. So you feel and you speak.
you.
This is your arena. Do you, boo boo?
Thank you. Thank you. And so, and again, I really do need that, because, it's one thing to say, I'm going to go out and I'm going to frame it this way and I'm going to present it that way. And until you have to say the words and hear the words coming out of your own mouth. And then it's almost like stepping outside of yourself. And you're like, damn, did I really go through that? Did I say that? Was that really my life? Well, tonight is going to be one of those nights where, yeah, that was really my life. And if no one else realizes it, I realize it, So to go back to the question, my upbringing. So, my parents were divorced. My parents divorced very early. So my mom and my dad. And this, me, my dad has always been my superhero, And again, when I say that, people kind of look at me strange, because there's this misconception that most, if not all, Black boys, Black men grew up without their father. And, again, I'm not saying that hasn't been true for some people. And listen, I sympathize and empathize with anyone who had that experience. That was not my experience. Like, I had my father my entire life. Like, my dad, I was almost 40 when my dad passed away in 2010. But even up until he passed away, like, my dad was like always like right there in my corner. And my dad was probably one of, if not the only person who never tried to make me feel bad about myself, period. And so again, growing up in a Black family, growing up in a Black community, but also being the Black kid who was always bused to schools. I always went to integrated schools. And again, I grew up in the early 70s. So, the civil rights movement had just ended. So by the time I was in kindergarten, we were already like maybe like 5 or 6 years outside of the civil rights movement. So everything was still something new being integrated into school systems, being
Everything
integrated.
was so fresh.
So fresh, exactly. So, the logistics changed, but the attitudes and the behaviors hadn't changed. I grew up in the South, and again, some people may not believe that. Some people may be like, oh, whatever. I grew up in the South. That's true. I grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas. And it amazes me how people don't know anything about Little Rock. And because they think Little Rock is some like little small farm town in Arkansas. I'm like, Little Rock, and I said this the last time, is a historical city. And Little Rock is a vital piece of the civil rights movement. You had Little Rock Central High School. You hear about the Little Rock Central High 9, where 9 Black students, were integrating, a white high school, and the National Guard had to come out because the governor of Arkansas was against integration. And so, history, and a violent history on top of that, because again, when people want to about the civil rights era, they tend to leave out the violence. It's like you want to, shout off Martin Luther King, but you don't want to talk about all of the things that made Martin Luther King who he was and why, and how you didn't even want it from him when he was trying to give it to you. But now all of a sudden, Martin is the standard for everybody else. But we'll come back. We'll come back to that, right? But my point being, I was always the outsider in every situation. I was the outsider at home. I was the outsider at school. And again, I was just a little kid who loved books. I loved comic books. I always had these, fantasies in my head, like, being a superhero and having superpowers, and so if anything, that made me different, because the standard then, if you were a boy and a Black boy, you need to be watching football every Saturday. And if you weren't watching football every Saturday, something was wrong with you. If you weren't in sport, something must be wrong with you, And when you're a kid, you don't have any thoughts of that. You're just like, I like this particular activity. That's all I want to do. I want to color. I want to ride my bicycle. I'm not thinking about anything outside of that. But people put that on you. Even when you're a kid, people put things on you that you have no clue what they're talking about.
That's very true.
Having to go to class, and because I was considered gifted and talented, because again, I love to read. So again, I read at a higher level than my age, suggested that I should read at. And so again, I was always bused to schools, and I was always the only Black kid in all of my classrooms, in all of my classes, and from kindergarten all the way up to high school. Again, if there was like a gifted and talented, or like, a college bound or an advanced placement class, particularly English, because I love English, that was like my favorite and best subject. I was always the only Black kid, but also Black male in these gifted and talented or advanced placement English classes. I knew all the classics, Shakespeare, Frost, Thoreau.
Yeah. But that's a tremendous amount of pressure to put on a child.
Yeah, and that's the outside, but at home, and I'll say this, and again, in families, and again, I don't want anyone in my family, if you're watching this or if you'll see it later, I don't want anyone to think that I'm trying to expose or reveal or any of that. I'm telling my story my way. And so at home, my mom drank, so again, my parents divorced. My dad, moved on with his life, new, mate, wife, girlfriend, whatever you want to call it. They bought a home together. They were thriving, living well. My mom, drank, but my mom was a very brilliant woman. And I want to say this because anyone who knows me, if you knew me when I was a kid, then you knew my mom, and everyone knew how brilliant my mother was. My mother was one of the smartest women that I have ever met in my life. And I'm not even just saying that because she's my mom. Like academically, my mom was a beast. My mom, she graduated valedictorian of her high school class, her senior high school class. I'm dead serious. And she was a whiz at math. She was a whiz at numbers. Math was my worst subject, by the way. But because my mom, she had all of the makings of someone who could do and should have done great things in this world. Unfortunately, the time that she lived in, again, she came along in an era where women were either housewives or expected to be housewives and domestics and all those things, and she wasn't that. And then if you talk about women finally like entering into the workforce, even if you were able to enter into the workforce as a teacher and educator, you were never going to be at a station above a man. That was just the thought back then.
Yeah.
That because, whatever, and again, I'm not telling her story. and she's not here to tell her story, so we don't even really need to go too much into what happened with her. But I will just say that my mother probably died. She died from congestive heart failure. But at the
I'm
same time,
sorry about that. My condolences.
thank you. But I think ultimately my mom probably died from a broken heart, and she had a broken heart her entire life, and just based on things that she told my sister and I when we were growing up, some of the things that she endured, it kind of colored my thinking a little bit, but it certainly
Yeah.
colored my upbringing because, that anger.
Well, I want to interrupt you right here. I'm sorry. Forgive me. When you said that it colored your view of the world, how so, and what is your view of the world?
Well, because me, I'm no nonsense. I don't have the time, the patience, the tolerance for stupidity or things that I consider to be stupid. And again, I think that and I have a built-in discernment. I know when people are being disingenuous, even if they don't say it.
Yes.
And so my mom, part of my upbringing with her was everybody who smiles in your face is not your friend. You know, Part of her teaching for me was, what again, a dog that brings the bone carries a bone, meaning,
Or another one. Not all skin folk and kin folk.
are all exactly, and yeah, and so that's being what I guess what I could get out of that to say is that my view of the world is that I'm always guarded. I'm always You're always going to be guilty until proven innocent with me. You
You
know,
always ready.
Always ready. Exactly. Because I tell people it's not what you say that gives you away, it's what you don't say. And when you
Yep.
talk to someone like me, and you would say, psychics, prophetic, empathic, whatever, I just know what's going on behind what's in front of me. I see and hear
Yeah.
things at a different level, But with that being said, it's not that you're, thinking that everyone is out to get you, but at the same time, that if a person had an opportunity to get you, most would take it.
Most probably would. Most probably would. And
Most,
that has to be said. I agree with you. And I'm kind of biased because I like the in terms of how you navigate the world and how you see the world and interact with the world. You do have a lot of the teachings of your father, the
oh yeah,
calm, the assessor, the diplomat, if you will, but also your mother, who
yeah,
was the warrior, who was the fighter, who was the protector, who took no shit because she couldn't, because she was black, a woman, she had two kids to take care of, and anybody that gets in the way, well, that wasn't a fucking option. So, you know, I I vibe with the energy of your mother because how can I say this? A black woman in that time raising two strong children,
yeah,
the obstacles alone are daunting, but she did it
yeah,
because you here on this podcast.
yeah.
Okay. So
So,
you're helping people, you're doing stuff. So I just want to say that she would be very, very proud of you,
thank
and
you.
she is.
Thank you. And you've
Uh,
heard many stories. I've told you many of the stories. And so again, but even my mom, being who she was and how she was, my mom unfortunately was my biggest critic. So whereas my dad was my biggest hero, my mom was probably like, if we were Voldemort and Harry Potter, she was my Voldemort. You know what I'm saying? And that's
yeah.
just being honest. And people would say, how can you talk about your mother that way? I'm not talking about my mother. I'm telling you my experience with her. Because on the one hand, where she was my protector, my mother was also my biggest abuser. Again, I grew up with my mom because she drank, and she drank a lot. And when she drank, her emotions ran away from her,
Yeah.
and she would just kind of go into these rants, and most of the time, I was always the target or the focus of her anger for whatever reason. If I breathe the wrong way, why are you doing that? What are you doing? And so having to live with that, and at the same time, my dad would come and get us every weekend, and like going to stay with my dad was like a whole other ball game because then it's the house with the kid, like the picket fence. My dad had Cadillacs and good jewelry and money and all these things, right? And so it was the difference of having to live here in this state of just always like being afraid or being like just on guard, and then going over
Mhm.
here, it's blissful, it's peaceful, and you can be, loved on, because again, my dad, now a lot of people don't know, I actually have an older half sister. So, it was me and my sister where we have the same mom and same dad, but my dad had been married before, and my dad was 15 years older than my mom, right? And so my dad had a daughter that was 20 years old already when I was born. So, but I only met this woman twice. And so, I don't really factor her into my family
Yeah.
dynamic. I don't know her.
Yeah.
You know, but again, so when you ask me about my childhood, so yeah, again, me going out now and nightlife, like I always knew that I wanted to live like in nightclubs and music. And so, it was comic books when I was a kid, but then by the time I hit my teen years, I wanted this whole nightlife dynamic. I wanted to own a club. I wanted to dance and DJ and all those things. And so again, by the time you guys met me in Santa Barbara, that was my dream come true.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Totally. What I'm going to go on to my next question, my third question. In your own words, how would, and I think you have already with what you just shared with us, how would you describe yourself?
you know what? If you ask me to check a box, I don't believe in boxes, and it's so funny that this, and when we talked about these questions, I was having a conversation with another friend of mine that I've known forever, and we kind of got into a little bit of a discussion, if you will, a very spiritual discussion about, things and identities or whatever. And so there's this idea that people say, oh, if you're black, you must think that this, and this, because all of this is part of being black. And if you don't do anything like that, then you're not really black. We're going to take your black card. If you're LGBT, gay, again, I don't check that box either. Now, if you ask me if I have a preference for my sexuality, I do. But if you ask me, am I part of some larger group or some larger community? No. And that's my choice, because I feel like my life is my life. I don't owe that to anyone, and I don't have to fit anyone else's dynamic. And if you like certain things, like them all you want to. But if I don't like those things, it's not because I'm being forced not to like them. It's just that maybe it goes against something that I hold dear to myself. And so I just think that I am a person who loves and who is open to love or being loved. But at the same time, I don't belong to any particular group. Is that answering the question?
Yeah, that does answer the question, because I've always known, and I'm going to share with the audience. You are one that has never liked being pigeonholed, or to break that down further, you do not like being defined by other people's criteria.
Correct.
If you are going to, if someone's going to define you, you would much prefer to use your own criteria. You actually, we've had a conversation about that once, and you said, I don't define myself by other people's criteria. Also, right. Number two, it ain't none of their damn business what I do, right. Or who I do, when I do, right. Or why I do.
Right.
Okay. So my thing is that you've always been the type of person. Stop worrying about what I'm doing in my life, because if you're so worried about what I'm doing in my life, that means you're not doing enough in yours. Right. Time to get busy.
Right.
And so I think what you just said was very diplomatic, and it was very true. You're letting people know, hey, nowhere in my name, my business, or the way I move in life does it indicate that I have to justify who the fuck I am for nobody. Right. You are not beholden to nobody. And I think that's what you just said, baby. I just made it a little bit more succinct, and I love it.
Well, before we skip on,
please continue.
I want to give a little bit more layers to that, because
please, yes,
it's something that I've heard before where people say, oh, I don't agree with your lifestyle. And it's like, baby, who told you that my life is a lifestyle? Now, just because it doesn't fit some box that you put yourself in, or some box that you put other people in, whether you agree with it or not, I really don't give a damn what you agree with or don't agree with when it comes to it. I march to beat of my own drum. Now, again, I am the kind of person where if I like you, then I like you, period. Like, you're dear to me. And especially if you're near and dear to my heart, I will go to hell and back with and for you. There's nothing that I will do for the people that I care about and that I love. Sometimes
Truth.
that has come back to bite me. And even now, and again, being transparent, when my sister passed away, she left her 27-year-old son, my nephew, and he was having a bit of a hard time there in Arkansas. And so, of course, I moved heaven and earth to get him here to New York. And he was living here with me for 3 months. And so as of
Which was
today,
really sweet of you to do.
well, like I was saying to you earlier, when we talk about doing things that people say, oh, well, that's really nice for you to do, and that's really sweet of you to do. And, again, thank you for that. But at the same time, that came with a consequence, and that came with a price for me. And so when we talk about, collateral damage and paying the consequences of someone else's bad choices, it's what, 9/31, Friday, August 29th, 2025, 3 months later, and I have no clue where he is because he left my house in a most disrespectful way. The time that he was here, as much as I sacrificed for him, not only his entire life, but especially after my sister died, his mom died, and me looking out for him. And he gave me his, pardon my French, he gave me his ass to kiss. So for the 3 months that he's been here, I helped him get a job. I helped him with, just get settled in and all these things. And all I got was disrespect, to the
I'm
point
sorry
where,
about that. Yeah.
sorry. Listen, don't ever be sorry about things like that. Me, again, like I said before, I expect people to be who they are because that's who I think you are anyway until you prove me wrong. And
Yeah,
so
that's fair.
I always knew that, And so
Mm-hmm.
it's unfortunate that I would have to say that in this environment and this particular form on this platform, but that's the truth. And so again, my nephew disrespected me the entire time he was here, but at the same time, I knew that he had disrespected his mom when she was alive, and so I didn't expect it to be any different for me. But again, because of my commitment to my family and because of the love that I had for my sister, of course I was going to look out for her son, and him being the last member of my immediate family, of course I was going to look out for him. But unfortunately, sometimes the people we give the most to are the first ones. Like I said before, if they can do you in, they will do you in. And so now when you look at me with a fundraiser saying, help with this, help with that, part of that is because I sacrificed everything financially, socially, even in my home life, to look out for and open the door for a family member. And when it got to the point where I couldn't maintain that, or things began to fall apart, in a very temporary situation, by the way, but when things began to fall apart for me to where I'm like, okay, can you help me with this? And that person is like, yeah, I'm out. I'm out.
Wow. Wow. And when I say I'm sorry that you went through that, I'm not giving you false sentiment. I'm sorry that you had to go through that because I would be it's hurtful, when you are opening your heart, your door, your home for a family member that's in need, and they turn around and bite the hand that feeds you and treats you like shit,
Right.
when all you did was say, hey, I'll give you shelter. I'll give you food. I'll help you get back on your feet so you can do these things for yourself.
Right.
That's love. That's love. And when they turn around and just give you the middle finger, well, yeah, that hurts, And so how you're handling it is very much like a king.
Right. Well, and again, I think about conversations that we had. And so today I was sitting in Burger King and I remember saying to you one time, Berto, sometimes I think you just do things, you cut your nose off to spite your face.
I still do, baby. I still do. I'm the type of bitch that I will burn the bridge that I'm standing on so you understand the level of crazy this bitch is.
Right. But,
oh, yes. Everybody burns that.
My point is exactly what I felt like in this situation, and not just my nephew, but in so many situations. Like, I've had people, and them trying to prove a point, they would rather burn the bridge down, and again, they will cut their nose off to spite your face. Now, you think that you leaving the way you left my house and being the asshole that you were this entire time, you thought that was pissing me off or getting back at me? No, you just made it impossible for you to come back if you ever have to come back again. Because most people never think that they might have. My mother used to always say, be careful not to burn the bridge that carries you across, because you never know when you might have to cross it again. You see what I'm saying? My dad would have said something similar. Again, my dad being the voice of reason always, my mom was just the voice of crazy. She just didn't give a damn. But, my dad was the person who said, well, no, there's a strategy to that. And there's a certain way that you have to frame it and look at that. But at the same time, you address it one time and one way, and then you just move on, and it will be whatever it is. Keep moving.
Yep.
And so that's where I am now. I'm just getting settled into the part of me that says, you got to keep it moving. You don't have time to be hurt. You used to tell me all the time, well, you know, I think that, you know, this can hurt you. And I was, oh, I don't get hurt. Oh, you can't hurt me. You can just piss me off. And I'm like, yeah, you can piss me off, but guess what? That did hurt.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I never like to say,
Ty,
I never like to admit that things hurt me, because in my mind, I'm like, well, that's a sign of weakness. And I don't want to be weak. I don't want people to think that I'm just like, you know, helpless, you know, hopeless, you know, person needing to be lifted up. Like someone asked me yesterday, like, well, who's taking care of you? I said, I don't need to be taken care of. You know, I've never been a person to have to ask anybody to do anything for me. I don't even want to ask anybody to tell me the time, let alone do something really, you know, for me. But then having to be in a place where, you know, yeah, I have to ask for help, and I'm asking for help publicly. But then the other thing that I had to think about is that, you know, crucifixion is always public. Resurrection and
always,
ascension will always be private
always.
and in select company. So everybody can see you fall, but most people won't see you when you get up. And a lot of people don't need to see you after you've gotten up. You know?
That's true. I wanted to share this with you. I'm going like, for strong people, and I see you as a strong person, strong people have a hard time being vulnerable. And not to mention vulnerable publicly, because they want to keep up that veneer of strength.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is that vulnerability and strength go hand in hand, you know, because when you are powerful, what use is that power if it's not shared? If it's not, because you sharing power when you're helping people, you're sharing power when you're lifting people up. Well, that's what they're doing for you. When you're going through a hard time and you finally have to say, hey, uncle, I need help. You know, like, uncle, I'm claiming uncle, I need help. I need help. And when you finally do that, you allow people to share in your power or future power by helping you just as you helped others.
Right.
That's life. You know, a king will always be surrounded by his court, by his family, by his friends. These people will support you if you're lucky,
Yeah.
you know? And those that can't, won't, don't, that can be worked out later,
Right.
because you are focusing on you.
Right.
You know, the ones that are part of your life and wanted to be part of your life and helped you and are helping you, they're the ones that matter.
Right.
They're the ones that matter. They get first dibs. Everybody else, they can wait.
You're right.
So your vulnerability is what makes you magical. So keep that in mind.
Thank you. I'll say this and then we can move on. But, you know, again, I never want to just, you know, throw something out there without sharing the lesson that came with that. And so
most definitely.
Being prologue. And so again, you know, I'm not an angry person to where, you know what, that's going to make me hate life and I'm going to be this angry person to everybody going forward. That's actually not what's going to happen, because the wonderful thing and the thing that you just said, the magic of it all, again, you know, I have again, people who know me now don't know that, you know, I come from a religious, if you want to say that, background. So, you know, I was in the church for a number of years, and then I ended up in the nightclubs. But again, people from the church would say, oh my God, he just ran off so he can go and be in the club. And I'm like, well, and people in the club think, oh my God, he's on this new spiritual thing. So both sides don't know the history or the connection to the other. You see what I'm saying? So if you met me in church, you might have a hard time singing in the club. If you met me in the club, you might have a hard time knowing that I came out of the church, because those are two separate worlds. So I went from the pulpit to the juke joint. And to be honest, I like the juke joint. You know?
Yeah, I'm going like, you're helping people, you're healing people and everything. And you were about that church life, if you will, and you know, whatnot. But the thing is that, and maybe it's because I'm a witch, so I don't know. I'm going like, why is it that when you can still hold God high and still have a drink at the damn club? How that gonna hurt you?
Well, you know,
that's what I'm going like. You can still. I mean, when you heal people, the people in the clubs need healing too. What? We just gonna ignore those people? When God said, "Go where I send thee," you go.
There you go. And then that's what I'm saying, because Jesus was not a Christian. You know what I'm saying? You never saw Jesus in the synagogue unless he was turning over tables, because y'all in that you had no business doing. And when
That
he met
part.
and they were about to stone her for adultery, and he was like, "Well, whichever one of y'all about to throw the rock, you might think about where you were before you got
Exactly.
over." And so I say,
Mm-hmm.
again, most people think, "Oh, he's always saying something against the church." No, I'm not saying it against the church. I'm just saying that I found my people, and it just happened that they weren't in the church. And guess what? I'm
Yes.
going to find more of my people, and they won't be in the church, but neither will I. Because Christ, God, Spirit, universe, source, all around us, all up and through us. We're all a part of it wherever you go. And so I recognize that in people, and the people who have attached themselves to me even now are the people who have that light in them. And so again, if I'm at happy hour and we're drinking and we're having a good time, I can promise you before I leave, before the lights come up, before they pull the gates and tell everybody to go home, I've already had at least 3 sessions over in the corner, and somebody is in tears, not because they're drunk. It's because they have been broken, they have been wounded, and they just want to be heard, because everybody
Yes.
heard and seen. Even the hardest person, the toughest person, is a vulnerable person that just wants to be seen and wants to be heard, and they want to be made whole. And so that's what I take out of everything that I go through. Yes, it hurts me while I'm going through it, but at the same time, I can see that it's helping somebody else get through it, if it's happening to them or if it will happen to them.
Exactly. Um, who are, how you have, sometimes you identify as, well, not identify, but you have a name, Black Phoenix.
Right.
And then you have the name Divine Chaos NYC. Who are they personas? And if they are in fact personas or parts of your personality, what are they and why those names?
Well, 2 things, so Black Phoenix, I'm an entrepreneur, right? So, I have a business. I have a legitimate business called Black Phoenix Interactive. I work in online digital marketing, affiliate marketing, media. And so by profession, my job is to work with advertisers, media agencies and publications. So like Vogue is a publisher of mine, Forbes is a publisher of mine. Fortune Magazine is a publisher of mine. So again, if I have companies that say, "Hey, Ty, we want to, spend X amount of dollars in advertisement, but we want to be advertised in this particular media channel with this publication," I negotiate those deals. So that's what I've always done professionally for like the last 20 plus years of my career. Black Phoenix is an extension of that, but Black Phoenix was me saying, "Hey, because again, my industry is one that is just like right with layoffs all the time, and over the last 20 years, I've gone through with maybe 3 layoffs. And so even now, my situation now was started partly because of a layoff at the beginning of this year, right? But where my agency, Black Phoenix Interactive, I've always had a business of my own. So I've always been able to negotiate deals on my own, under my own company and by contract. So, I've always had, contracts, and I could do like side business and make money that way. So even if the industry went dark, I still had revenue coming in through my own business, and I pay taxes and
Smart.
all. Yeah. So same thing with Divine Chaos. Divine Chaos, again, that's the life coaching business. I just started the life coaching business this year, as a matter of fact. I started the life coaching business 2 years ago, but I didn't really start to put in the work into it until this year, and especially because of the layoff. So I'm like, okay, so multiple streams of income. If I can provide a service, and if I can, invoice for that service and be paid and be compensated for that service, that's a business. And so if you say, well, Divine Chaos, Black Phoenix, well, yeah, they are business entities, but as a persona now, in Santa Barbara, and especially in the Wildcat and just all over, downtown Santa Barbara, especially, I was known as the Black Phoenix, and the Black
I
Phoenix,
remember.
the Black Phoenix, only because, being a comic book kid, the X-Men, Jean Grey was my favorite, one of my 2 favorite Marvel characters, Storm being the other.
Yep.
But especially because the Phoenix, as a mythical creature, has always been known as the bird that, every 500 years, it would just burst into flames. It would self-combust. It would burst into flames and be reduced to ashes, but then it would rise again from the ashes,
Yes.
And I were to look at my life, and I'm like, that's the life that I've always lived. Like, I've always been a person who would, like, not necessarily, like, self-immolate, But at the same time, I would be that person that if I went down in flames, I would get back up again. And again, if we talk about Christ consciousness, if we want to put it in a religious sense, the resurrection, being resurrected, rising from the ashes, rising again, a phoenix will always rise. And I was talking to
Yes.
a friend the other day, and he said, well, you know what? I was reading some guy and, some famous author, philosopher, psychiatrist, and he kind of had a similar arc to yours, whereas, he started off this way and then he ended up going down this path of spirituality. Then he became like this indigenous shaman type. And he called himself White Eagle. And he goes, and it made me think of you because he called himself White Eagle, but you're Black Phoenix. And he goes, I kind of thought that they were the same thing. And I said, well, you know what? Eagles soar, phoenixes rise. An eagle will soar high.
Work.
But a phoenix will
That
always.
basically that was I see you going like that was divine chaos going like stay in your lane, you little bird. Stay in your lane.
Now that you mentioned this, so now if we take it over to the divine chaos, and so again, I think I might have told the story when the pandemic was happening. New York City was ground zero when COVID first hit. Back in 2020 or whatever. And I can remember, when we were in this mandate of sheltering inside, like nobody could go outside. And I can remember, after being inside for weeks and when we went into lockdown in New York City, it was like early spring. So like sometime between mid-March going up until maybe August. But those first few weeks, we were still kind of like, in between winter and summer, or not winter and spring. So that meant the weather was still kind of all over the place. And so going outside and it's all gray and gloomy and there's no one on the streets, and if you saw one random person, they're all masked up or whatever, and the trains weren't really running or they weren't running consistently and you really couldn't be on the trains. But long story short, the one day that I was able to get on the train and I had gone into the city and I can remember doing whatever I needed to do. And then on my way back to Brooklyn, I'm getting on the train. I'm on the platform waiting for the train to come back to Brooklyn. And someone has spray painted the word chaos on the wall with like neon green spray paint. And they spelled it with a K. And I like that. And the reason why I like that particular word chaos, going back to the comic books as a kid, Doctor Strange was my jam, the Avengers, the Scarlet Witch. And if you've seen the Multiverse of Madness, the Doctor Strange movie, you know that the Scarlet Witch, her power was based on chaos magic. And so and again, that was something from my childhood that I carried with me into adulthood. So I've always had this fascination with like numerology and astrology and chaos and all those things. But at the same time, that scientifically speaking, the universe, if you believe it, started from this whole Big Bang theory. But we say that, it was chaos and darkness and this big explosion, this chaotic explosion is what made order and put everything into order. And if we bring that back to a religious sense, then that you can't have light unless you have darkness first, because out of darkness, light came. Let there be light. So that order it ensues. You cannot ever have one without the other. It's the yin and the yang, right? It's always gonna be my little yin yang tattoo.
Yep.
You always have
yeah, there it is.
So that was the divine chaos, because guess what? I'm connected to source. I'm always connected to the light. But at the same time, had those chaotic moments, even in that moment, even in the darkest moments, there's always something that comes out of that. And again, it would be the phoenix rising from the ashes.
So. Exactly. Well said. I would go like, who? Well, I just want to touch on the chaos thing before I continue, because I think that's just very powerful. Chaos. What you said was that out of order actually came from chaos. And that's powerful for this reason, for our audience to understand that, like the Big Bang, in the beginning, it's chaotic, right? Because it's order is being born out of chaos. But too much order, after a while, when there's too much order, too much rules, too much regulations, everything, it's constricting, order eventually breaks down into chaos again. So it's a cycle. Yes. Because too much order is an abuse of power, which then gives birth to chaos. So they both give birth to one another. They're two sides of the same coin. And what I like is divine chaos, divine, which is order,
Mm-hmm.
chaos, which
Mm-hmm.
is what too much divine, too much divinity leads you to chaos. Too much chaos will naturally give birth to order.
Correct.
And I like the fact that you have two in one
Yeah.
because we all do. This whole life has you. It's a choice to walk a path.
Right.
It's natural for the human condition to walk both
Right.
because we do. You know, that's our nature. So that's why I said very well said on your part.
Well,
How who?
so
Oh, go
we'll
ahead,
move on. Let me just say this one thing, and then we'll move on. Because again,
please.
you follow me on Facebook, especially. Again, I tend to, share my spiritual insights. And again, I'm not trying to convert anyone. And
No.
again, I always say, whatever people believe or don't believe is none of my business. I'm not here to lead
Yeah.
you to. I'm not going to lead you to Krishna, to Jesus, anybody. I'm here to lead you to you, that man or woman in the mirror. You're one of the things. My point
Yeah.
being, you've heard me say all year, I'm like, this is a number 9 year. I'm very much into numbers. And so, this being a 9 year, and 9 being a number of cycles ending and cycles beginning, because in the numerical system, 0 is not a number. 0 doesn't even exist. So it's 1 through 9. And so when we talk about 9 and 9 being complete, but also having to go back and start all over again. So cycle of birth and rebirth, death and rebirth, death and rebirth. And death is
Yep.
always, right? And so when we talk about divine chaos, past being prologue, Phoenix is rising, you understand that everything you're going through right now, and I want this to go out to the audience because I know that even now, somebody on this live, or if you go back and watch it later, you might be having some moments in your life, that are challenging and trying and chaotic. But just know that it's only temporary, and again, everything that you need to
Exactly.
overcome, you've already overcome it before. You just have to overcome it again. And the bottom of every mountain, the top of every mountain is the bottom of another. My pastor used to say it all the time. And so you
And he's
always
right.
do it all over again. But the one good thing about climbing mountains is that you develop lower body strength and your legs get stronger from having to keep climbing. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? And
Mm-hmm.
in ascend to the highest of heights, And so I just want everyone out there again just to take a moment and just, be thankful for where you are, for what you've been through, even if it hurts right now. But just know that you don't have to stay there, and it won't always be this way. But you've got to make it up in your mind that you're not going to allow it to be this way because you. And again, I hear people talk about faith, but faith without works is dead. And so you've
Yep.
always got to apply yourself. And so go through it, but then go through it and go on. Move on from it. Ascend.
I love it. Who are your most influential people? Who have been the most influential people in your life? People that moved you, people that inspired you, people that kind of inadvertently gave you the direction that you wanted to take. Who are these people?
Well, the first one would be my dad. And again, I say that only because my dad was just like my most favorite, well, one of my most favorite people on the planet for sure. But again, my father was a very wise man, and my father went through some challenges in his youth, and so again, he wasn't an angel, but like my dad would always say, I'm not an angel, but I try to keep one on my shoulder. My dad would say that all
Oh,
the time.
that was sweet. I like that.
And so if I had a compass, a moral compass, and just a mind to discern right from wrong, my dad was that for me. I can tell you, when I was 30, and again, like I said, me, I didn't grow up being gay or anything like that. I was a normal kid. If anything, I think, and not even thinking, when I was elementary school, middle school, high school, again, being the only Black kid in predominantly white spaces, I had a love for rock and roll music. So I always had the colored hair. So, you see everybody with colored hair now.
Mm-hmm,
But in
mm-hmm.
the 80s and the 90s, you would see the white kids with spiked hair, colored hair. I had spiked colored hair. I wore parachute pants. I had the chains, and you see the music videos, the Madonnas and the Duran Duran, the
Mm-hmm.
Flock.
Mm-hmm.
I had that style. So again, it was me taking on the style of my environment and the music that I listen to. But again, if you're in the Black community, anything that's other than what Black, oh, that must be you gay. and especially if you're a black boy, you gay. So, if you like rock and roll music, you can't like rock and roll music and be black. You gay.
Mm-hmm. You get. Yes, but I can still like the fucking music. Thank you.
And you
Yeah.
when I was a kid, I wasn't thinking about being gay. I didn't even know what that shit meant. It didn't even care what it meant. You see what I'm saying? But people
Yeah.
put that. I just knew that I like Duran Duran, I like Cyndi Lauper, I like Culture Club, I like Bananarama, I like Aerosmith, I like Rolling Stones, I like the Thompson Twins. And I can remember one time, the first time I had like some black kids moved into our neighborhood, and we were playing with the kids across the street, and they were listening to like the local soul station and Kool and the Gang. I think it was around the same time where Kool and the Gang first came out with Celebration and all that. And I didn't know the song, and then they were like, "What kind of music y'all listen to?" You know what I'm saying? And so it was always having to be shamed for being different. And so, if anything, if you ask me, and I know I'm answering a different question from the one you just asked, but I'm saying like I've always been different, right? And
Yeah.
so, again, if you talk about people who influenced me, and my dad saying, just whatever. But again, when I finally got to be like around 32, and now, of course, as an adult, now later when I decided, yeah, I have a same-sex preference, and that came when I was 28 years old. So up until 28, I was not even interested in same, or 20, yeah, 27, 28, whatever. But again, I didn't grow up with a same-sex life or same-sex experience or same-sex history. And we've talked
Yeah.
about this. And so,
Yeah.
and
I
so,
get that.
so having to tell my dad that when I was 31, and him saying, well, all I'm going to say is I love all my kids the same. That's all my dad said. He said, I love all my kids the same. He
That's
said,
all he needed to say.
and he said, but you know what the Bible says, because again, I come from a Southern family, and most Southern people are Christians, whatever. And he said, but you know what the Bible says, but at the same time, he said, the only thing that I would say is it's always be a man. And by that meaning, you keep your word, you take care of yourself, you hold the responsibilities, and you don't let anybody walk over you. That's all I'm gonna say about that.
Exactly.
So my dad told me that,
Exactly.
right? And so then, of course, even years after that, when he got sick, my dad passed from pancreatic cancer. So even when he got sick and he was on that last round, and I've told this story, and every time I tell it, I start to cry because
Oh, I'm
it was
sorry.
it was me realizing that my dad is actually leaving. Now I'm 38, 39 years old, almost 40 years old, and I've had my dad my whole life. And now here I am about to lose him. And I said to him, and he had lost his voice. It's like it was like in the last 3 weeks of his life, right? And so little by little, his body started to shut down. And so he's at that point where he's about to lose his speech. And I was living in Santa Barbara at the time. Matter of fact, I think I had just met you in Marcus, because that's 2010. And it's me calling my dad because, again, my industry laid off, unemployed, can't go home because I had no money to go home, and my dad's dying. And I'm like, shit, how am I going to get there? My dad is like, he goes, I know you would be here if you could. He goes, I understand. If you could be here, you would. I totally get that. And I said, well, you know what, Dad? I said, I just want to apologize to you for something. And again, his voice is leaving. And I said, I just want to apologize to you. And he said, apologize to me for what? And I said, I just want to say you've been so great as a father to me. And I'm just sorry that, you got a son. You had to end up with a son like me. You know what I'm saying? And my dad said, you don't ever have to apologize to me for anything, because you turned out to be the most beautiful son that I could have ever dreamed of. You turned out to be more than I could have ever dreamed for. So you don't ever have to apologize to me for anything. My Aunt Betty, my dad's oldest sister, my Aunt Davidson. A lot of people say, where did you get this last name, Davidson? Well, Davidson is not my original last name. Davidson is a family name, but it's not my family name. Davidson was the last name of my aunt, my dad's oldest sister. But her first husband, his last name was Davidson. But my entire life, my Aunt Betty had been my Aunt Betty Davidson. And so when I was 27 years old, I went to live with my Aunt Betty Davidson. And my Aunt Betty Davidson basically gave me a whole new life. So my Aunt Betty Davidson, my dad's oldest sister, she became like a second mother to me. But
Oh,
even
that's so sweet.
You met my auntie. You met auntie.
I did. I did.
And my aunt, she was the next person in my life to say to me, "You don't have to apologize for anything." She said, "You won't get any criticism from me, dear." She said, "You live your life however you want to, and you don't have to explain that. You don't have to apologize to anybody for that." And she said, "I will always love you no matter what." So if you talk about influential people, my dad, my Aunt Betty, and then my next person would be you. It would be you, because I would not be this person. There would be no divine chaos. There would not be any Black Phoenix if there was not Alberto John Kennedy. And all those nights on the patio at Wildcat and watching you and seeing people come and sit at the table and talk to you, and you would read for them, or just share with them, not even read for them. And again, I think people sometimes like try to cheapen our natural spiritual gifts and say, "Oh, well, he's a tarot card reader." No, baby, you're a divine being, and you're tapping into that divine knowledge that we all have access to. And those who are wise enough to understand it and share that and open doors and shine light through that, those people are the angels. Those are the real angels. And so with that being said, you were my first earth angel, and a person who not only showed me, how I could grow and flourish and heal and help, but at the same time, I saw you be vulnerable, you know, and even seeing someone like you, because like, yeah, like I knew you could handle things, physically, mentally, like you could handle anything, but just watching you and trying to be an example, because there were times when I'm like, damn, because everybody wanted to be in your presence. Even now, most people won't move unless they can talk to Alberto. You know what I'm saying? And even when we would go out and hang out, and we're trying to have a moment, and people are coming up, Alberto, and you got to dry their tears and all of that. And I would see that, and I said, yes, that's someone that I can admire. Now, yes, I had come from a church where we're laying hands on people, we're prophesying to people, we're speaking in tongues and all of that, and those things had their place. But to see it in the real world, and to see it take on a different form, and to see the people being blessed and being healed and being appreciative, I got that from you. But at the same time, you always telling me, Ty, you know what, you're supposed to be doing the same thing. Like, I don't understand why you don't do it. And I was like, Roberto, I'm not you. I don't do it like you. I can't do it like you. I never thought that I was at your level, especially when we talk about gifts. I never would see myself being in the same space as you. So again,
The thing is, if I may, the thing is, in that time, I always knew you would be doing what I do.
yeah.
I just always knew. That's how come I always was. In Spanish, there's a saying, cuchillo de madera, no corta pero como chinga, which is a wooden knife. It doesn't cut, but fuck it bugs. Because I was your wooden knife. I was always going like, well, you can do what I do. And people come to you because, well, baby, look at you. You have a presence. You have a mission. You have this energy and a desire, most important of all, because whether you have power or you don't have power don't mean nothing if you do not have the desire to help somebody else. And you did. And so that's why I always saw that. And that's why I always used to bug you. Sometimes I used to bug the hell out of you because I was going like, so what you doing? But you could do that though. Okay, I'm just saying, Ty. I'm just saying, so I was just like, oh, and you used to frustrate you. But it's because you, suffice it to say, I am very proud of you.
Thank you.
Oh, I love this question. Okay, go ahead.
One second, I promise. So fourth, and I have to say this only because today, again, is August 29th. So August 29th, 1993, and I had just turned 20. I was 21. I was about to turn 22. And I had just joined this wonderful church. I was still living in Little Rock at the time. And I had just joined this wonderful church called Trumpet in Zion. And I have to say this because August 29th being today. And, today is significant for a number of reasons. It's Michael Jackson's birthday. It's also 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. But for me personally, it was the 29th that I joined this church called Trumpet and Zionists. So this whole world of spirituality and just gifts and people being spiritually gifted and awareness, and even to where I am now, talk about the kingdom of God being inside of us and being connected to the source and God not being in the church. My pastor at that time, a man by the name of Dr. Lawrence E., or let me say Apostle, and then Dr. Lawrence E. Braggs. And he was and is my spiritual father. So again, before I went to church because I wanted to be a choir director. I say this all the time. I wanted to be a choir director because I like music, and so I was a choir director, but that man was the first. And again, I've had bad experiences with people from church because I felt like, church people are some of the most hypocritical people on the planet, and again, because growing up, because my mom drank, and people would always say, oh, well, girl, y'all got demons in y'all. Like, oh, y'all mama drink, y'all going to hell. And so, again, every time, and even people in the family, if they were church people, they all had something to say, because my mom drank and she drank around us, whatever. But my point being is that I never had a love for religion. Even now, I don't have a love for religion. I have a love for spirituality. You see what I'm saying? I have a love for Jesus, but not Jesus in the church. Jesus as I know him, as the example, as the consciousness, as the way that we're supposed to be, period. Love. But my point being, it was that church, that pastor, that man that set the wheels in motion for me to become divine chaos now. You see what I'm saying? And even now, and
That's awesome.
He passed away 3 years ago, but even now there are things that I think and ideas that I have. I can still hear that man's voice in my head. I can still feel his presence around me. And even the last time I saw him alive was in 2019 or 2018, I should say. And even then, I had gone to visit Little Rock. I had gone to visit the church, and he, allowed me to come up and speak and share with the church. And when church was over, he whispered in my ear, he said, "You still got it." You see what
That's awesome.
Was trying to encourage me and push me out there. I wanted to be a choir director, nothing else. But he recognized that I had other gifts. And that's the last thing he said. He said, "You still got it." And so
that's awesome.
I wanted to honor him because, again, it was August 29th, 1993, when I joined that man's
beautiful.
church. That's it.
Well, consider him honored. This one is very important, this question, because it lets people know from your history, your background that we've just shared with the audience. It lets them know you've touched on the struggle, the trials, the tribulations, the challenges that you have faced. That has shaped you. So this question is kind of reminiscent of you rising from the ashes, like the Black Phoenix that you are. So this question is, are you happy?
Am I happy? I think the answer, if you want me to be truthful, I'm not. Can I be happy? Yes, I can be. But if you ask me if I'm happy now, I'm not. But that's not a bad thing, because now, because I'm in the process of rebuilding, and there are good things happening. There's some things that I hope to be able to share in the next week or so, because things are finally coming back into focus, coming back into order, coming back into place, and then I will be happy.
I got you.
But I'm at peace about that. Let's just say that
I like that. Sometimes peace is the prelude to happiness, what do you want people to remember most about you?
Wow. That's a tricky question for sure, because I always say I don't want people to remember anything about me. I'm like, let me just live and just,
Why?
Because, I don't like attention. I really don't, and again, like you said earlier, I understand that I have this presence, that gets attention, but I don't like attention. I don't like to be the center of focus, and so if I do something, I try to move in secret. I don't make a big deal about it. And I just want to fade and just ride off into the sunset. And again, earlier, I put up a meme from Sunset Boulevard where you're like, okay, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up. And honestly, I'm the complete opposite. I don't want to be, I don't want to be that close. But at the same time, if I can inspire someone, if I can be a beacon of sorts to someone, to see you shine and to see you go on and live out your truth. And if somehow I was a part of that happening for you, that's the memory. That's more than enough. Even if you never say my name again, just to see you doing what it is that you are meant to do, and even more than you thought you could do. But knowing that maybe somehow I influenced or shaped that in some way, inspired that in some way, that's the memory. That's enough for me. I don't need a plaque. I don't need a statue.
I remember back in the day when we used to kick it, when you have to come to my house, you visit my mom, and then, we're talking or whatnot, or we went out, to Wildcat or whatnot, or sometimes Whiskey Richards and stuff. But when I first met you, you were, I got a feeling of you. You were highly private.
Oh, yeah.
And you're a highly private person. And that's what I knew. I learned about you. And that's where we are polar opposites, right. Because I'm loud. But I remember when I first saw you, and I met you once, and then you checked me because you're going like, well, I met you once. You just don't remember, but I met you once, and you ignored me. And I'm going like, I don't even remember you. But then I'm going like, okay, well, let me fix that. Right. I apologize if I insulted you. That was not my intent. When I apologize, when I insult people, I'm usually more direct. So let's start again. Pleasure to meet you. My name is Alberto Kennedy. And then we started talking, and then boom, we clicked, because I knew the first vibe that you felt was there. You're going like, who this bitch? But you didn't say it. You were very diplomatic, but I know that was in your mind. But I'm going like, hey, we have to start somewhere. And so we did. And then boom, best of freaking friends. But you are very private. You used to go to, whenever you were in public, be it Starbucks, be it Wildcat or a restaurant, or when you're by yourself, you put on those earbuds and you were reading a book or on your phone or listening to your own, marching to a music all entirely your own. I found that very, very, a hallmark of your strength, because at that time I was very needed. I needed to be around people. I didn't know how to be just by myself, and I admired that. No, let me be blunt. At first, I envied that because I didn't have it. I didn't understand it. But then when I just studied you, and I'm going like, he's protecting his peace, and I'm going like, shouldn't you be doing that? And I was telling myself that. So I learned a great deal from you just by you being you. And I think that's awesome. And I think that's why a lot of people learn from you, because you're living your life. Yeah. And you're showing people, hey, you don't have to do this. You can do you. That's also relevant. That also matters. And you're still teaching somebody by you doing you.
And again,
so thank you.
You're welcome. And again, past being Prologue, because even now, when I go to happy hour now, I still have my earbuds in, and my friends all laugh at me. And someone even said, like, why do you come to the bar if you don't want to talk to people? I said, well, because I drink. The bar has liquor. So I come to drink. I didn't come here to be friends with everybody. And again,
and also what galls me is the audacity of some people. I'm going like this. When exactly did you become beholden to them?
Right.
You can go into a place, have a cocktail, and not say a word.
Yeah.
And that is your prerogative.
But here's where the gift. Yeah. Here's what the calling, if you will. Let's just use a word that they all know, the ministry, right? Because ministry is not church; it's just serving people. Ministry is just all about being of service, or having agency. How about that? Because even in government, you have ministers that aren't really just government. But my point being is that where my gift betrays me is that even when I am trying my best to be off the radar, to be off the grid, to put up the don't bother me, the do not disturb sign, I can promise you there's going to be that one person. My friends laugh at me now because they see me working so hard to not be bothered. And sometimes me not wanting to be bothered bothers other people, particularly the people who want to bother me. But my point being, they get my attention. We start the conversation, and then before you know it, I'm off on a whole other tangent because it's almost like, you know this, you're reading a book. It's almost like you can read their life like a book. Yep. And I start to say things, and I'm just watching the faces change. And they're like, "How did you know that?" Mm-hmm. Every time I go out, I can promise you, before I come home the next morning, I've had this kind of conversation, this kind of interaction with somebody at the bar. Last Friday, I was able to go out. A friend of mine invited me out, and I was able to go out. And before I left the bar, I had already counseled like 3 people at the bar. You see what I'm saying? And when I say counsel, not because I sat down to like tell them, oh, do X, Y, Z, it's because we just started the conversation, and all of a sudden, things just start to happen. And I'm like, and they're like, how did you know that? Like, nobody else knew that. How did you know that? You see what I'm saying? And so next time I go, now, they look for you because every time something happens now, they always seek you out because they always want advice. And my job is to let me give you the tools. So the life coach in me says, no, we've already discovered the symptoms. Let's talk about the treatment. Let's talk about the cure. But then let's also talk about the maintenance, because you have to do the work, and the work is ongoing. You see what I'm saying? And
ongoing. Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
You got it. I was agreeing with you. Yes, you're right. That's what I tell them too. Whenever I'm out there, I'm having my dirty martini. I like going out by myself, get my dirty martini, and I'm just listening to music, and all of a sudden, both. Oh, hey, Alberto, how are you? I'm going like, dispense with the pleasantries. What do you need?
Right.
And then we talk, and the next thing you know, they tell me, and then I help them out. What do you feel about that? And they go like, why do you keep asking me that? I'm like, I'll not be that person to give you the answer. No, I'm gonna make you work for it, because we as people cherish that which we labor for.
Right.
So that's what you do. You're going like, I'm not going to give you the answer as a life coach. I'm not going to give you the answer. I'm going to help you. I'm going to guide you, but I'm giving you the shovel because you're going to have to fucking work.
Yeah.
Because, and it seems mean at first, superficially it seems mean, but no, get deep. What that means is that once they do the work, they have their breakthrough, but it is their breakthrough, not yours, theirs, not mine, theirs. So when they do it, they're going like, oh my God, they look at you and they say, thank you, because you helped me own my victory. Right. You didn't give me victory, you helped me own mine. You helped me get mine. That's what it's all about. That's inspiration.
Exactly. So whenever I can see that happen, then I know I've done my job. Again,
yes.
Not for the accolades. Again, it doesn't make me feel superior. It doesn't make me feel special. It just means that, guess what? I got it right, because I doubt myself. To myself, again, I can have an insight about something, and there can be 15 things that can happen that confirm what I'm thinking is just this like voice in my head. But at the same time, I see it happen in real time, and even then, I still need to be convinced that it was right. You see what I'm saying? Like, I'm not making things, I'm not pulling things out of the air. Like, no, that was a real divine moment. That was a real divine message that was meant for that person, and they got what they were supposed to get out of it. Now, if they can maintain that on their own, then guess what? Then I've done my job. I can walk away.
Exactly. But again, I don't know if we covered it and I missed it. What is it that you want them to remember of you? I'm like a pet bull, baby. I'm sorry. Whenever I ask a question, and if I miss the answer or whatnot, I'm gonna ask it again. I'm like, that's all, folks. I'm crazy. Go ahead, continue.
What I want to remember, again, if you've never felt seen, if you've never felt like you've been heard, then just remember that I saw you, I heard you, I see you, I hear you, and I care. Again, now, and I say I care. Now, again, as much as I say, leave me alone, don't bother me, I understand the assignment. And I know that I can't turn anyone away. I will never turn away a person who's really in genuine need. And again, being able to discern and rightly divide, I know when people just want attention and when people want help. The people who want help will do the work. The people who just want attention, every time you see them, it'll be the same problem over and over and over and over and over again. And then they start to block other people off because they want to keep you to themselves. They want to wall you in and keep you to themselves. And I'm like, maybe my mission and my purpose is too big for me to be stuck with this because you don't want to do the work. So if you don't want to do the work, I'm not the person to help you. But for the person who wants to do the work, that's the appreciation. You doing the work. So how do I want them to remember me? Just appreciate me through the work. Just go on to fulfill your promise. Remember me as the person who told you that you could do it. Remember me as the person who told you you would do it. That's it.
Yep. That's deep. That's really deep. I wanted to say that when we were in Santa Barbara and you were planning your trip, your exodus to New York,
yep.
I was torn because I'm going like, well, have a good friend, a good best friend, and I'm going to miss him. But I'm going like, hey, he has a mission. He's going to go to bring my. You know how my logo, not my logo, my mantra, if you will, my slogan is bringing light to dark places. That's what you do. You bring light to dark places. What's the use of having a lighthouse in some place that already the sun's shining 24/7? It makes no damn sense. You need a lighthouse where there's darkness. You need light. So to remind, not to guide people, I would never be so presumptuous. But what you can do, that light is to remind other people of the light that they have inside themselves. That's what you're doing. And that everything that you just described is what you're doing. All the challenges that you've been through, that forged you, that shaped you, made you ready for this mission, for helping people, for helping people turn on the light inside themselves. That's all we do.
Yeah.
And we keep our ego in constant check because there's so many people that can do what we do. Maybe even better, maybe not so much better, but they're still doing it. But a lot of them are doing it with ego.
Yeah.
And they're doing it for themselves.
Yeah.
They really don't care about the other person. What I can genuinely say is that you do care about people. I've seen it. You are legit. So I want to say, if you haven't heard it, I want to tell you. Thank you so much. Because you are helping people. You care. You're doing something. You know, there's other people. They have so many platforms, so much money, so much this and so much that. And the only person they worried about is themselves. No man is an island.
Yeah.
And you know that. And so thank you for letting people in. Thank you for connecting. Thank you for showing who you are on the inside. Because that matters.
Thank you. You're welcome again. Thank you. Because, I don't hear it enough, and again, I'm not a person who needs to be pat on the back or, be told job well done every time. But, everyone wants to feel appreciated every now and then. And,
well, and also you need to be validated because even though you don't need a pat on the back, some people don't need a glass of water, but they still thirsty on the inside. What happens is that you have to be thankful for the light that you have in your life. And so I wanted to let you know I'm thankful. And I know there's people out there that you have touched that are equally thankful.
Thank you. And again, I'll end with this. And so again, when we talk about, and I even posted this yesterday, I said, I didn't post for a minute because I was embarrassed because, it's like I was in a situation I had to ask people to help. But again, I wasn't asking people to give me something. I was just saying like, this is a short situation. And again, I have all these other things that I'm putting together to help with this. Please help. But because I had to put myself in a vulnerable position, I was so embarrassed because I mean, I'm a person of ability, meaning I will do whatever I can do, whatever I need to do to take care of my home, my family, myself, whatever. I never have ever had to be dependent on anyone for anything. And so it took me a minute to kind of get my head back on, right? Because it's like, no. There are still people who want to hear what you have to say and who need to hear what you have to say and who appreciate you. And guess what? You can't let them down just because you're down right now. And down, not even really down. I'm inconvenienced more than anything. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, how dare you be selfish and that prideful to where you think that I have to hide because if I go online, if I post something, somebody's going to be over here talking shit about me, or somebody's going to be over here saying this, saying that.
The thing is that I want to answer that. The thing is, you show me somebody who has not gone through upheaval. You show me somebody that hasn't gone through a financial constraint or a challenge. You show me someone that hasn't had to fight for their victory. You show me somebody that has never experienced those things, and I'll show you a liar. Because everybody on this earth has gone through something where they needed help. So no shame. You are doing what you do, and you're doing good. And if anything, the challenges that you went through reminds us that we are all able to experience the highs and the lows. We should be so lucky that we can keep our ego aside and ask for help. And I think that's a measure of an honest man, and you are. That you had the balls, you had the sack to ask for help when you need it. That is powerful.
And to that point, and again, I'll end it, but to that point, I want to say thank you because guess what? I was surprised and overwhelmed because people responded, and people who knew me from the bars, again, even if you've never had a conversation with me really deeply, like it was like people from a community that, again, that didn't have that up close and personal reaction or interaction with me on a regular basis, but those people showed up and they showed the F out. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, that's so awesome.
I want to know that I appreciate you. And listen, again, whatever you believe, and there's this one passage in the Bible that says, that if you give to a prophet, you'll receive a prophet's reward. And what I mean by that, I'm not saying that I'm a prophet, but I'm saying like you'll get it back in ways.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And so again, I just want to appreciate everyone. And so, if these extra doors start opening for you now, and things, that were once stagnant in your life start to move, just know that, I am praying and supporting and sending energy and positive vibes to everyone, but especially those of you who came to my aid when I needed it. I want double, triple, quadruple, immeasurable return for you guys.
That's beautiful. Well, Ty, I think that's what the time we have,
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so I want to say to the audience, thank you for joining in to this podcast, Ty. Thank you so much for allowing me to host, to be the host, to be the question asker, and for you to be the question answerer. Thank you so much. And I think that I just know good things are going to be coming for you, success, and just remember that I'm on your team. And so I'm your best friend. I'm one of your best friends. I care about you. You're family to me and my mom and my brother and everybody. So we got your back. And hey, if you need to, holla.
Will do.
And thank you to the audience for joining in as well. I wish nothing but the best for all of the audience as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for tuning in. Burrow, thank you for being here. And you did a phenomenal job.
My pleasure.
All right. Enjoy that martini that I'm about to.
I'm going to have to make my Cosmopolitan after I click off this, though. It is a Friday.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.